Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for May the 24th. Today we are reading together in Deuteronomy chapter 18, which is going to speak to us about a couple of positions within Israel. We read at the end of chapter 17 yesterday about the position of king and what would be expected of them. We're going to see some today concerning the position of priest and then also the position of a prophet. So let's read about that here in Deuteronomy chapter 18. I'll get the text up on the screen, and we will read along together. Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse number 1. Deuteronomy 18, verse number 1, the Levitical priest, the whole tribe of Levi, will have no portion or inheritance with Israel. They will eat Yahweh's food offerings. That is their inheritance. Although Levi has no inheritance among his brothers, Yahweh is his inheritance as he promised him. This is the priest's share from the people who offer a sacrifice, whether it is an ox, a sheep, or a goat. The priests are to give the shoulder, jaws, and stomach. You are to give him the first fruits of your grain, new wine, and fresh oil, and the first sheared wool of your flock. For Yahweh your God has chosen him and his sons from all your tribes to stand and minister in his name from now on. When a Levite leaves one of your towns in Israel where he was staying and wants to go to the place Yahweh chooses, he may serve in the name of Yahweh his God, like all his fellow Levites who minister there in the presence of Yahweh. They will eat equal portions besides what he has received from the sale of his family estate. When you enter the land Yahweh your God is giving you, do not imitate the detestable customs of these nations. No one among you is to sacrifice his son or daughter in the fire. Practice divination, tell fortunes, interpret omens, practice sorcery, cast scales, consult a medium or spiritist, or inquire of the dead. Everyone who does these acts is detestable to Yahweh, and Yahweh your God is driving out the nations before you because of these detestable acts. You must be blameless before Yahweh your God. Though these nations you are about to drive out listen to fortune tellers and diviners, Yahweh your God has not permitted you to do this. Yahweh your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among your brothers. You must listen to him. This is what you requested from Yahweh your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly when you said, let us not continue to hear the voice of Yahweh our God or see this great fire any longer so that we will not die. Then Yahweh said to me, they have spoken well. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I command him. I will hold accountable whoever does not listen to my words that he speaks in my name. But the prophet who presumes to speak a message in my name that I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet must die. You may say to yourself, how can we recognize a message that Yahweh has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in Yahweh's name and the message does not come true or is not fulfilled, that is a message Yahweh has not spoken. The prophet has spoken presumptuously. Do not be afraid of him. And that is the conclusion of Deuteronomy chapter 18. Again, focusing now on priests and prophets. We put this together, what we see at the end of chapter 17. We see the king, the priest, and the prophets. These are all roles that are primarily, or I should say primarily, that's not the right word. They're ultimately going to be fulfilled in Jesus. So that's just something to keep in mind within this section here. Jesus was the ultimate king, the ultimate priest, and the ultimate prophet. But that notwithstanding, let's think about what we see here within this text. Again, here within this text, we see that the Levites are identified in verse number 5 as being chosen especially from among the tribes to be this particular to fulfill this particular role of being mediators. Again, we think about what is said at Horeb that's referenced in verse 16. At Horeb, after they had heard my voice and seen the fire, they requested, hey, we'd rather not hear this voice. We'd rather not be that close any longer. So can someone stand between us? Can someone mediate for us? That's what the Levites are going to do. Moses did that primarily and has done that primarily since Horeb over the past 40-ish years. But now there's going to continue on to be priests who mediate here in this place. So we see Moses fulfilling this role. He fulfills a role as the prophet, the one speaking, but the Levites also have a mediating role in not just offering sacrifices, but also ministering in various ways and also teaching. That was their role, to be teachers, to be mediators, ministers, excuse me, and to be those who offer the sacrifices. They have a special role, not dissimilar to Israel's role among the nations. So just as Israel was chosen from out among all the nations to be God's people, so the Levites are chosen among all the tribes to be his special servants. Now, with this being the case, you would think, oh, well, they're going to be very privileged. They're going to have all the best places to live and all that kind of stuff. But the fact is they have no inheritance except in Yahweh. Yahweh is their inheritance, which means that they are dependent upon the giving of the people. They were taken care of by the people's generosity. Of course, this is not dissimilar to what we see with preachers and ministers today, that those in that role, myself included, are dependent on the generosity of the people. Now, I want to note here that they seem to find a good solid middle ground. They're not overly wealthy, but they're also not impoverished. They're just taking care of what they need. They have, and this is by, again, the blessing of Yahweh, but also the generosity of the people. Now, within this, we see that, if a Levite wanted to leave one of the 48 Levitical cities and go and serve at the place where Yahweh's name was, whether that be Gilgal or Shechem, Shiloh, or eventually Jerusalem, that's okay. They can do that. They can leave their home and they can go serve there in that particular place. They don't have to serve in one of these 48 Levitical cities. And in fact, it ends up being that a lot of those end up being gone, and most priests end up in Israel's history making their way towards Jerusalem and these other places at some point along the way. So that's the priests, the Levites, special people that God blesses through the generosity of the rest of the tribes. Now, whenever we get to thinking about verses 9 through the end of the chapter, I believe that's verse number 22, verses 9 through 22, there's a question we'll ask, and it's this: where do you get your information from? Where do you discern, from what sources are you able to hear the will of Yahweh? Are you able to discern Yahweh's will? Now, in the place where you're going to run into a lot of people who practice various types of customs, whether it be sacrificing their sons and daughters in the fire, whether it be practicing divination, telling fortunes, interpreting omens, practicing sorcery, casting spells, consulting mediums and spiritists, or inquiring of the dead. These various things that took place. Divination was consulting a natural phenomenon. My one note says, such as, and they would look at animal entrails. They look a certain way, that means this. They look another way, that means that. Or they would blow smoke and they would discern what the smoke means. They would have all these different things that they can do in order in their minds to determine the will of their deities, whichever ones they were serving. Now, it's this that they do. Again, this is a rejection of Yahweh. They don't rely upon Yahweh for what they need to know. They rely upon these pagan gods. This is one of the reasons why they're being pushed out. This is part of the reason for the conquest. Is this is a punishment from Yahweh toward these individuals, towards these nations, for rejecting him. And he says to the people, you don't do that. You, my people, you don't figure out your information from me in this manner. No, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to raise up for you a prophet. And this is Moses speaking, so he says, a prophet like me from among you, a true prophet who is able to properly give you the info that I want you to know. Now, by the time we get to the end of Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse number 10, we recognize that the final compiler of Deuteronomy says, we still haven't found that prophet yet. But of course, the promise is coming, and eventually it is going to be ultimately fulfilled in Jesus, this one who would give the information from Yahweh to the people, the proper, correct information. Now, the prophet who says he's a prophet and speaks presumptuously in Yahweh's name, or who speaks in the name of other gods, Moses says that person is to be put to death. But then he's anticipating a question from the people. Well, how will we know whether or not he is speaking in the name of, or whether or not he's truly speaking in the name of God? Well, it depends on if it comes true or not. If it does not come true, then you know with certainty that this is not from the mouth of God, that they are not speaking as mouthpieces truly speaking as mouthpieces for God. But what if it does come true? Well, there's another layer that we've already seen, another step in the process, chapter 13, verses 1 through 5, that if it does come true, that still does not necessarily mean that it's a message from Yahweh, especially if what they say next is to seek after other gods. So there are multiple layers here through which you have to work to figure out whether or not someone is truly speaking in the name of Yahweh. If they say they are and it doesn't come true, you know that's not from Yahweh. If it does come true, and yet what they say next is leading you away from Yahweh, that too is a good sign that these people are not truly speaking in the name of God. So again, put them to death. Do not be afraid of them. Do not fear what they might tell you. So here within this text, again, where do you get your information? Who is the mediator? Who is a true mediator between you and Yahweh? Well, it's the prophet who speaks well and who foretells well and leads one closer to God. Who is one that can mediate as well between Yahweh and the people? Well, those are priests. Priests can do that as well. This specially chosen tribe who relies upon God for everything that they have, and he does so through the generosity of people. They are able to mediate between the people and Yahweh. And really the same thing's true for the king. The king mediates between Yahweh and the people by setting the standard, by living out the example of what a true Israelite was supposed to be. And again, ultimately, all this is fulfilled in Jesus. Jesus is the king who sets the perfect example for the people. Jesus is the high priest, the great high priest who offers the perfect sacrifice for the people. Jesus is the great prophet who gives to the people the perfect word they need in order to be saved. All of this right here, though it's not, I do not believe this is supposed to, whenever an Israelite either read this or heard this initially, I don't think whatsoever they're thinking toward Jesus specifically. That's not in their framework. But for us, again, in the privileged position that we are in to look at the entirety of Scripture and how it works itself out, we certainly need to see that. We need to see that Jesus fulfills these roles perfectly, whether it be that of a king, whether that be that of a priest, or whether it be that of a prophet. And we should certainly be very thankful to live under his reign and under his rule as his people today. Be very thankful for that. I appreciate you tuning in for this reading on this Wednesday. Looking forward to being with everybody tonight for our Bible studies at 7 o'clock. Hoping to see you there, and hope you'll tune in again tomorrow for our read. I think we have a double chapter tomorrow. Yeah, we'll be reading chapters 19 and 20 tomorrow. Hope you can tune in for that as well. Take care, and God bless.